If you open social media right now, like the phone you're seeing on screen, you'll probably run into a video promising you can spot a narcissist in 3 easy steps. Suddenly, it feels like everyone is diagnosing everyone else. But there's a huge difference between a selfish moment, a messy relationship, and a clinical diagnosis like narcissistic personality disorder. Diagnosis isn't a vibe check. It's a careful, professional process. A personality disorder isn't just a bad vibe. Clinically, it's a long-standing, inflexible pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving that shows up across situations, and it causes real distress or serious problems in daily functioning. Look at the graphic on screen. Traits can exist on a spectrum, but disorder is where life starts getting blocked. When we use these labels as insults, we don't just get sloppy with language, we add stigma, and we make it harder to talk honestly about what people are actually experiencing. So, here's our roadmap. What should appear on screen? First, what clinicians mean by personality disorder. Second, why some traits may persist in humans, including through evolutionary trade-offs, without pretending that suffering is useful. Third, how therapy language gets weaponized online and what to do instead. We'll stay grounded in evidence as we go, what biology can and can't explain, how environment shapes development, and why nature versus nurture is rarely an either-or. Let's get into it.
To understand personality disorders, we have to look past how these words get tossed around as insults online. Clinically, a personality disorder is a long-standing pattern of inner experience and behavior, how someone thinks, feels, and relates. And it departs noticeably from what a person's culture typically expects. Crucially, the pattern is pervasive. It shows up across settings: work, friendships, romantic relationships, family, and even in private. And it leads to clinically significant distress and/or impairment in functioning.
So it's not just having a bad temper or being selfish sometimes.
Exactly. Everyone has personality traits. You might be a bit anxious, a bit dramatic, a bit perfectionistic. A disorder is different. The pattern is rigid, hard to shift, shows up in many contexts, and causes real suffering or dysfunction, often becoming clear by adolescence or early adulthood.
Most people have heard of things like narcissism or borderline personality disorder. I've seen them grouped into clusters. What are those?
In the DSM-5-TR, the main diagnostic manual used in the US, there are 10 specific personality disorders, grouped into 3 clusters. If you picture the 3 columns on screen, the clusters are a shorthand for the style of problems. Cluster A is odd or eccentric, paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal personality disorders. Cluster B is dramatic, emotional, or erratic, antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. Cluster C is anxious or fearful, avoidant, dependent, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, which is not the same thing as OCD.
But here's the problem with neat little boxes. Real people rarely fit into just one. Overlap is common. Someone might meet criteria for a Cluster B disorder and also have strong Cluster C anxiety traits.
That's a valid critique. We call that comorbidity. There's also heterogeneity. People with the same diagnosis can look very different. Take borderline personality disorder. You need at least 5 out of 9 criteria. That creates 256 different symptom combinations, kind of like that branching web visual on screen.
So 2 people with the exact same diagnosis might act completely differently.
Precisely. One person might externalize distress, anger, conflict, while another turns it inward. Because of issues like overlap and heterogeneity, a lot of the field has pushed toward dimensional approaches. The ICD-11, used internationally, diagnoses personality disorder by rating severity and then describing the trait profile. The DSM also includes an alternative, more dimensional model.
Dimensional? Does that mean it's a spectrum?
Yes, in practice, it's more like a spectrum than a yes or no stamp. Instead of, do you have it, we ask two questions. How severe is the personality dysfunction? And which traits are most prominent? On screen, think a severity scale plus a trait profile. Think of traits like sliders on a mixing board, not on-off switches. In ICD-11, the 5 main trait domains are negative affectivity, detachment, dissociality, disinhibition, and anancastia.
Anancastia? That's a new word for me.
It refers to rigid perfectionism, rule-boundness, and a strong need for control. It overlaps with what used to be captured by obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. The key difference is we're measuring the trait and how much it actually impairs someone's life.
This makes more sense for explaining human behavior. It explains why a very controlling manager might be high in anancastia, but not necessarily have a disorder if they're still functioning. And it moves us away from labeling people as fine versus broken.
Exactly. It can increase precision and reduce stigma. Instead of a single label, you might document moderate personality disorder with prominent detachment, or mild personality disorder with prominent negative affectivity.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this looks in real life? Maybe compare two people who might look similar on the surface.
Sure. Imagine two people who both come across as emotional and impulsive. Person A has intense fear of abandonment and, under stress, may engage in self-harm or other high-risk behaviors. On a dimensional view, like the split-screen graphic, Person A might show high negative affectivity and high disinhibition, with severe impairment. Now Person B. Big emotions, quick reactions. But they maintain steady work and mostly stable relationships. They might still be high in negative affectivity, but their severity could be mild, or even just personality difficulty. Same general trait sliders, different severity. And that difference is what changes the clinical picture.
That distinction is huge. It sounds like we need to be careful about diagnosing our friends based on a few bad days. Up next, we'll look at where these patterns come from: biology, environment, and everything in between.
One of the most persistent questions in my field is whether personality disorders are born or made. And like the split-screen graphic on screen, it's rarely either or. It's both.
We hear this debate all the time. Is it genes, or is it the environment you grow up in?
It's an interaction. Twin and family studies suggest genetics matter, but not completely. Heritability estimates are often in the moderate range and can vary a lot by the specific disorder and how it's measured.
That still sounds high. Does that mean if a parent has a personality disorder, their child is like 50% likely to have it too?
Not exactly. Heritability is a population statistic, not a personal forecast. That chart is about how much variation in a group is associated with genetic differences, not the odds for one specific child.
So it's not like inheriting eye color. It's more like inheriting a vulnerability.
Exactly. You don't inherit a diagnosis like a trait. You inherit tendencies. For example, higher emotional reactivity, stronger impulsivity, or a bigger alarm system. And as that sensitivity scale shows, the environment can buffer or amplify those traits. Supportive relationships can turn the volume down. Chronic stress can crank it up.
Speaking of environment, let's talk trauma. The internet seems convinced every personality disorder is just a trauma response.
Trauma and other forms of childhood adversity are important risk factors, especially for borderline personality disorder. Many studies find much higher rates of reported adversity in BPD compared with people without BPD, but trauma is neither necessary nor sufficient. Plenty of people live through severe trauma and never develop a personality disorder. and some people develop personality pathology without a clear history of overt abuse.
That's a hard sell. We love a clean cause and effect story, and it can feel validating to say, this happened because I was hurt.
That validation matters. Scientifically, though, we also look at gene-environment correlations, meaning a person's inborn traits can shape the environments they end up in. For instance, a highly reactive child may unintentionally evoke more conflict, or later select higher risk settings, creating the feedback loop you see in that cycle diagram.
So it's a two-way street. Biology affects the environment, and the environment shapes biology.
Exactly, and that's hopeful. If biology isn't destiny, then interventions, therapy, stable relationships, and skills can shift the trajectory. We're talking about patterns of coping that got reinforced over time. And patterns, unlike eye color, can change.
This brings us to the biggest puzzle of all. If personality disorders cause so much suffering and wreck relationships, why didn't evolution just weed them out? Look at that DNA turning into a mountain range. Why would a bad trait survive the climb?
It's only a paradox if we imagine evolution is aiming for happiness. Natural selection isn't a caring designer. It's a blind process that tends to favor traits that help genes get copied, often through reproduction and kin survival.
So being miserable or making others miserable doesn't matter if you still pass on your genes.
In evolutionary terms, the key idea is trade-offs. A trait can be costly for long-term bonding, but under some conditions, it can boost short-term mating success, like a seesaw where one side goes up when the other goes down. Take traits associated with psychopathy, for example. The evidence isn't one note, but some studies do find links, depending on the population and how traits are measured, between higher psychopathy and earlier reproduction, and sometimes more children. Other studies find the opposite.
Right. This is where people bring in life history theory. Instead of calling it a clinical label, think of it as a faster versus slower pattern. More focus on the present, less on long-term investment.
Life history sounds like a business term.
It's from biology. In rough, unpredictable environments, selection can favor a faster pattern. Take more risks, mature earlier, invest less in the distant future. In safer, predictable conditions, a slower pattern can pay off. Delay, plan, invest.
And some researchers argue certain borderline personality disorder features can line up with that faster pattern, especially when there's a history of early instability. Not as destiny and not as an excuse, more like short-term coping that can become costly over time.
But what about the cheater strategy? I've heard that term used for narcissism.
That's pointing to frequency-dependent selection, where a strategy's success depends on how common it is. Picture a group that's mostly cooperative. In that kind of group, a rare exploiter, the cheater, can do surprisingly well because there's so much trust to take advantage of.
But it's self-limiting. If cheating becomes common, trust collapses, cooperation breaks down, and the cheater advantage shrinks.
So nature can keep these tendencies in the gene pool, but usually at low levels.
Exactly. Sometimes rare strategies persist because they occasionally pay off. And remember, we're talking about traits on a spectrum. Disorder is often what it looks like when a trait is extreme, rigid, and harmful in the person's real environment.
Then there's the modern mismatch. In a small community, reputation is everything. If you're consistently exploitative or grandiose, people catch on fast and you face real consequences. Today, the social map is bigger. You can move, reset, and meet new people quickly online. So some harmful strategies can travel farther before they're flagged.
That is terrifying. It sounds like you're saying these behaviors are natural.
We have to be careful. Natural doesn't mean good or healthy. Cancer is natural. Viruses are natural.
So explaining an evolutionary angle isn't an excuse for the behavior.
Never. Understanding why a vulnerability can persist helps with clarity and prevention, but it doesn't obligate anyone to tolerate harm. Explanation is not permission.
It seems we're walking around with Stone Age software in a digital world.
And that software can misfire, especially when the environment rewards speed, novelty, and performative confidence.
Let's pivot to how that misfiring shows up in our actual conversations. We see these terms everywhere now. Is that helping or hurting?
We've entered the era of weaponized therapy speak. Like the two phones colliding on screen, the words aren't there to clarify, they're there to win.
I see this everywhere. You open a dating app or TikTok and suddenly everyone's ex is a narcissist.
Exactly. It becomes a status game. I label you a narcissist. I'm the enlightened victim and you're the pathological villain.
And that's where it gets dangerous. Diagnoses aren't clapbacks. A real assessment takes context, history, and careful evaluation, often over multiple sessions, not a comment thread.
And algorithms reward the clean, dramatic story. 5 signs your ex is a narcissist travels fast. Relationships are complicated, and sometimes people are just selfish. Doesn't.
Is it really that widespread, or is it just a few loud voices?
It's not just vibes. People have audited this. In 2025, experts reviewed the top 100 TikTok videos under #mentalhealthtips and found 52 contained misinformation, with many others vague or unhelpful.
And we see it with borderline personality disorder. Online, BPD gets thrown around as shorthand for "my ex is crazy," often aimed at women. Clinically, BPD is a serious condition with intense emotional pain, unstable relationships, and an elevated risk of self-harm and suicide. Turning it into a breakup meme is stigmatizing, and it can keep people from getting help.
So let's look at some of these terms. Gaslighting is a big one.
Huge. Real gaslighting is a sustained pattern of manipulation that makes someone doubt their memory or perception. And that's why the 2-panel visual matters. On the left, someone's reality is being rewritten. On the right, it's just 2 people disagreeing.
That distinction is vital. Disagreement is normal conflict. Gaslighting is psychological abuse. When we blur them, we lose language for real danger.
What about narcissist? Is it ever warranted for a layperson to use that word?
You can describe narcissistic traits. Someone can be entitled, arrogant, or lacking empathy in a moment. But narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern across situations that causes meaningful impairment, not just hurt feelings in one relationship.
And here's the irony. Sometimes the label becomes a shortcut that stops you from processing what happened. Like that shield on screen, the label can block the messy knot of relationship dynamics you'd otherwise have to untangle.
So what should we do instead? If someone is treating us badly, how do we talk about it?
Focus on behavior, not diagnosis. Don't say, "You are a narcissist." Say, "You dismiss my needs and I feel invisible."
Exactly. Describe impact and set a boundary. When you yell at me, I feel unsafe. If it happens again, I'm leaving the conversation. And use that checklist idea on screen. If the label doesn't change your action, or you can't assess it responsibly, don't use it. Boundaries protect. Diagnoses as insults escalate.
That is a powerful distinction. Use the language to decide your actions, not to win the fight.
Right. If the label is just helping you win the argument, it's a weapon. If it helps you name harmful behavior, get support, and leave safely, it's a tool.
We've talked about the biology, the evolution, and the internet buzzwords. But I want to end on something practical. like the kind of living room conversation you're seeing on screen right now. If someone we love is living with a personality disorder, how do we support them without losing ourselves?
The most important rule is that compassion is not compliance. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to be yelled at.
That's a hard line to walk. Online, it's usually two extremes. Either you're a savior who fixes them, or you cut out toxic people immediately. Real life is usually the messy middle.
Exactly. Enabling often looks like shielding someone from consequences or constantly rearranging your life to avoid conflict. And if the only time the relationship gets serious attention is during blow-ups, the whole pattern can start to revolve around escalation. If self-harm comes up, treat it as a safety issue every time. But you can still keep consistent boundaries around how you communicate.
So what does compassion with boundaries actually sound like? Can you give us a script?
Sure. Try this. I care about you. I'm not going to stay in this conversation while I'm being yelled at. I'm going to hang up now, and we can try again in 30 minutes, when we're both calmer.
That's powerful. You keep the connection, I care, but you don't reward the behavior.
Precisely. You validate the emotion, not the harmful action. And these diagnoses aren't life sentences. Long-term studies of borderline personality disorder show that symptom remission is common over time, while rebuilding work, school, and relationship functioning often takes longer. In one 10-year prospective study, about 93% had at least a 2-year period of symptom remission, but about half reached what researchers defined as recovery, meaning remission plus good social and vocational functioning.
That's a stat you rarely hear online. It's usually all doom and gloom.
It's good to know change is possible. But we also need to talk about safety. If things escalate to a crisis, what should people do?
If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, call 911. In the US, you can also call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or use their chat. And you can reach out even if you're calling about someone else and want guidance on what to do next.
Thank you both. The takeaway today isn't to diagnose your friends. It's to remember that personality is a spectrum, and we can set boundaries without stigmatizing people who are struggling.
And maybe log off TikTok and have the real conversation.
Great advice. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the spectrum of self. We'll see you in the next episode.